عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته walaalayaal kusoo dhawaada podcastigii toddobaad maanta waxaa ila joogto Monica oo ka timid xafiiska oo Immigrant Affairs waxay tahay qofka u xil saaran language access coordinator waayo cusub waa qof aad isku naqaanay in badan xiriirkeenana aad u fiicnaa marka maanta waxaan ugu soo booqatay community-ga waxayna ka hadli doontaa shaqada ay qabato waxay noo sameyn doonto marka marti inoo tahay daawo insha Allah wixii su'aal qabtid comment ku soo jawaab make sure in subscribe asaartid la share gareeysid dadka community-giina and like that. Welcome everyone and thank you for coming Monica and I would love to welcome you to our podcast. So the first question will be, can you please introduce yourself and a little bit about your background?
Thank you, Farhan, and thank you for the Somali community for me being here. I'm sitting here listening to you in your language, and I'm sitting there shaking my head. I'm so used to being around multilinguals that it's just become a part of me that I'm like, yes, I can feel this. So I really appreciate you having me here today. Just a little bit about myself. Again, I'm Monica Lakhwani.
Yeah, a little bit.
I was born in Pune, India, and both of my parents were immigrants to the United States. So they came in the late 1960s, early 1970s, and they came via the reunification process, right, for relatives and family members. My background lies primarily in education and program development. And as you stated earlier, I am currently the language access coordinator working with the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Affairs. So really appreciate being here.
Thank you. And how long you been in this position?
So fairly new to this position, 3 weeks. Haven't been here too long. This is actually my 4th week. I was formerly the multicultural specialist with Jefferson County Public School District, nearly 2 decades there. So my background with them, with the staff there and the families and the English learners really created a foundation for me to be, in where I am right now in this position.
Okay. And can you a little bit explain more on position that you did last 2 decades? What have you done with JCPS?
Yes, so with JCPS, I worked in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Poverty, and my job was to make sure that I can facilitate professional development trainings and sessions for their staff. So we had 6,000 certified staff and about 5,000 classified staff.
Wow.
So programs that I had developed were things like seeking educational equity and diversity cohorts, working with the Fairness Organization on LGBTQ cohorts. This year, we were supposed to implement an Islamophobia cohort.
Okay.
Among other things, among other training sessions that had to do with diverse learners that were in our district and reflective of the families.
Wow, that's amazing. And what you're doing right now, it's kind of connect for what you've been doing the last 20 years. So
yes, it's laid the foundation for me.
That's amazing. And what initially inspired you to do this work with Louisville Metro?
So I think the timing just worked out really well. It was a good transition to move from that position into this position. It also aligns very well with my passions towards the immigrant, or with the immigrant community and with our refugee families. So providing that language access is enabling them to become stronger in our community, and then just strengthening our community. So it aligned very well with the way I wanted to see the vision of what I wanted to see the community look like, as well as, where I wanted to be.
You want to be.
Correct.
Wow. Thank you for that, because you see that you have a vision and a plan to make this community better. Thank you for that.
That is my goal.
Yeah, awesome. And so tell us what projects or initiatives currently you're working on with this office.
So, like I said, I'm fairly new in this role. Currently, I am reviewing all the departmental language access plans and looking, to create training modules for department staff so that we can kind of improve on those plans, keeping track of language access and language data within the Louisville community in Jefferson County. I am sure that must be aware that our foreign-born population is nearly 10% here in Louisville, and those who do not speak English very well are close to 5%. Correct. So with 100 countries represented and 150 languages, language access becomes a key, essential component to our community.
Correct. I mean, I came here 16 years ago, and I can reflect on that. When I came, I was like a teenager, and I have to take responsibility of interpreting my aunt, my uncle.
Yes.
It was a lot of responsibility that I have to take, even when I go see family doctor. Like, I don't see interpreters, so I have to do it. But sometimes there's things that I don't know how to interpret, as a young man, and sometimes it's awkward, being in a room with an adult, and you have to interpret.
Correct.
So those are barriers I seen, and that's why also I was motivated to do what I'm doing right now, to have a community advocacy.
Correct.
Where we can advocate on behalf of the community and let people know the issues and concerns we see daily basis.
Yes, and we see a lot of students. I saw a lot of students doing that, right? Doing interpretation where they didn't understand technical terms.
Correct.
Or maybe they were a part of that same community, and then they would bump into those same members again in the community.
Right.
So it shouldn't be a family member or a child that is, having the responsibility to interpret or translate documents.
Yeah. But when we go to the Title VI, where
Yes.
the civil right that 1964 was passed for the LAP, which is limited English.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so Title VI is part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It prohibits discrimination, right, for race, it includes national origin, and a part of that national origin is also language. Right. And so we need to make sure that we can provide those pieces that we have gaps in, so that we do not create barriers, and that we can make it an inclusive society that we live in. About a quarter of our population is foreign-born, right?
Correct.
And they contribute to our economics and our social environment, right? And so if we're going to weave that fabric into the United States, then we need to make sure that we are creating those inclusive communities and not creating barriers.
Wow.
I'm an education person, so as an education major and an educator, it's equally, important for us to recognize that our native language can actually help us with our English proficiency. It can help us strengthen our English proficiency, right? So we're not just creating multilingual learners, but we're strengthening our ties here. We're strengthening our English language, right? And we're even strengthening our own ties to our own culture and language.
Correct. I agree with all that, because I was also an educator for JCPS, and I can tell all these things, connecting, but also doing what I said when it comes to language access. I think for me, I believe it's a basic human right.
Yes.
And so how are you making sure that this language access is success in our community? What is it?
So currently my role is internal to Louisville Metro government.
Right.
And so I'm going to start there, and that is where we're making sure that each department has a language access plan.
Correct.
And that all their vital documents are translated into the languages where the needs of the community lie. We have I Speak posters that just within the few weeks that I've been there, we've updated and included 2 additional languages on, so that, community members can come in and point to their language and say, this is what I speak, and then, have those services available to them. So identifying vital documents, identifying the language needs in the community, making sure that departments have their plans in place, providing training for the staff, so that they are not only understanding what those plans mean, but also aware of any kind of policy changes that may occur.
Thank you for that. And because the reason I mentioned that, I always get phone calls from my community members, as a community leader. One of the concern was, let's say when there's 2 cars wrecked to each other, accident. Is a Somali person or native born? police or LMPD does not, most of the time they do not use language line or bring an interpreter to hear this both sides of the story.
Sure.
And I've seen so many people in our community say, because of I didn't speak the language, he took the word of the person who speaks the language, and I feel that's wrong, because so that's how majority feels, to be honest. And when I heard about this program and what you're doing, it hit. I felt that, I felt my shoes in those type of community members.
Sure.
And we trying to make sure that everything is in place, for them to have equal rights
and to be respected and heard.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up, and my grandmother was here all of her life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, most of my life that I grew up here. She lived in the United States for 30 years, and she didn't have language access. And she was an independent, strong woman. But here in the United States, she relied on her daughters.
Wow.
And I feel like if she had that, then she would have had that sense of confidence again in the United States. Because
Correct.
a lot of our elderly who come here, it's tough for them.
Yes.
And to have that support, it kind of strengthens who you are. It makes you confident again.
Correct.
It builds the independence again. So I think about her when I'm in my role every single day, because there are multiple folks like her in the community.
Yes. That they can't even pass their concern to someone else, or they can't even get basic healthcare access,
Yes. And when she was around people who spoke her language and who were bilingual and also spoke English, she would laugh, and then she would say a few words. She would say thank you or hello. So you could see that, it was boosting her confidence and boosting, who she was as a person and how she wanted to be.
Wow, that's great. And those are the stories that makes our community going and keep us
Yes.
motivated. So how do you stay motivated on this?
Knowing that I'm a part of the immigrant community myself, knowing that I am, I'm creating, pathways for individuals to be able to access documents or be able to understand what's happening, right, within Louisville Metro government. I'm creating that access.
Awesome.
And to me, that's motivation in itself, right?
Yes, big time, because same as me, my goal is to have community members have access to the information.
Yes.
Access to what's happening in the city, access to education, employment,
Yes.
entrepreneurship, all those stuff, mental health. Those are the things that matters daily. But if they don't have no access to it, then they don't they don't access it.
We're working for them.
We work for them. Thank you for that. And language is, I think, one of the biggest barriers we face every day.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you are in that.
And it's also an essential component of culture. It is who we are.
It is who we are, and you're right. It is who we are, and thank you, because you reflect. We can relate to you and say, you understand where we're coming from, people in our community. So, which is bonus for that.
And I've worked with the Somali community for years. So I've known you for years, and I've worked with our students and families for years.
Awesome. And so when you were working with families, what are the, when it comes to language barriers, what are you thinking about those families when you heard about this? So,
I would think about the families who maybe would come here as single moms, who would have to rely upon other individuals, and they would always go to like a man outside of the family, or they would have to rely on the oldest child who may still be in elementary school, right?
Right.
And so that's not what we're looking for, and that's not what we want. Those single moms are strong. Those single moms that I saw, raised a household.
Correct.
And so we want to make sure that those barriers don't exist, so they can continue to fortify their community, their families, and themselves, right?
Correct. You're right. We need to change things to have our life easier than what it is. So how do you see the future of this work you're doing?
I envision, this is a tough question, but I honestly, I get ecstatic and thrilled to see that Louisville is a welcoming city, and that it is a thriving, inclusive, environment. And so I envision multilinguals everywhere and languages being spoken as I'm going to restaurants. When I grew up, my parents would start speaking in Hindi and they'd speak in Sindhi and everybody would look around, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would be like, okay, shh, keep it down. But when you leave that environment and you go travel abroad, you're hearing all those languages. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm hoping is that, when we say we're global and inclusive, that one day we are global and inclusive, that I can walk down the street and I can listen to 3-4 different languages, right, and feel at home.
Great.
So that is my vision.
Wow, that's an amazing vision, and I have a firm belief that it's going to happen.
I do too.
All right.
I do too.
Great, thank you. And so the last one, what is your takeaway for our audience who are amazingly listen to this podcast probably once a week or once a month?
So I think I would like to emphasize a couple of things. One, that it is a federal requirement. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. And then two, any government agencies that's receiving federal grant funding and money has to provide vital documents, right, in the language of the community. Mm-hmm. And then the last takeaway is that just remembering that just because we're learning another language or we're using our own, right, doesn't make less of another one. Mm-hmm. So if I am using my own language or my native language, that doesn't mean English is less for me, right? It builds upon that proficiency where I'm going to be learning both.
Yes.
Right?
Correct. That's amazing. And something came up to me, my mind. We got the last question.
Sure.
But if someone goes to the medical doctor's appointment
mm-hmm.
and they don't provide interpretation, or they don't have an interpreter on site, or they're not calling someone to help them, what should they do? So
I can't speak for the medical doctor's appointment. I can speak for Louisville Metro government. Know that there are I Speak posters and cards available. Mm-hmm. What I would recommend is that your community get familiar with our webpage. Mm-hmm. I will share that the Language Access webpage is now up. Mm-hmm. So it does provide some information at the top of the webpage, LouisvilleKentucky.gov. There is a drop down where they can access their language. Mm-hmm. And then one piece of information I'd love to share is that now we have comment forms.
Comment forms, okay.
On the Language Access webpage as well. And it's in English currently, it's in Spanish, and it's in Somali.
Okay.
So community members can fill it out if they have not had access, or to a resource or to a service or to a program. They can complete that. Those forms come directly to me. They can email it to me or send it in.
Wow.
So we're starting with those languages, and I'm sure we're going to be adding others on there.
Wow, that's great. I mean, that's itself is a startup, it's a startup.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and that so that you guys can look into that and how we can make it easier for them next time they come.
And definitely available to hear, any kind of feedback that the community provides as well.
Wow, so, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for the podcast.